So first off, hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I want to introduce you to my guest and co-panelist here. And some of you might know Trisha already, but Trisha Miltimore is a fellow entrepreneur coach with us at Evolve. She's a multiple business owner. She is a killer podcaster. She's a keynote speaker. She's a wife. She's a mother of 4 children. And she has 20 years of firsthand experience running a business and understands everything that comes along with that. So Trisha, welcome. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Excited to be here, especially with this topic of conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that sort of kicked off this theme for us, and I mentioned it to you, was I'd heard this statement that mental isolation kills your ability to take action. And I thought, it really stuck with me. I thought it was such a profound statement. And it really made me think of it as a common theme with so many of the business owners and entrepreneurs we deal with, where even though they could be surrounded by sizable teams, often the mental isolation that business owners feel is significant. And it can be really hard to be making any progress or taking any action when you really feel that sense of being not only isolated, but sort of in a cone where you're just separated from everything else. And then it made me think of you, because I know so much of your work from a coach standpoint is often about building connection for people, building out network, and helping business owners not only to take action, but to feel more productive, to feel more confident. And those are areas you really excel at. So I thought this would be a great conversation for us to have. Let me ask you, and I'll maybe do this sort of interview style, but why do you think that mental isolation really does kill our ability? Or, what are your first thoughts on that quote?
Yeah, the quote really resonates for me as well. I feel like I spent so many years in mental isolation for many reasons, and we'll get through many of those today. But, when you think of mental isolation, like, what does it mean to you? What is it for anyone who's listening? How does that show up for you? And I think of mental isolation as feelings of that you're doing it and going at it all alone, living in almost a vacuum. And you feel more drained sometimes than driven. And what I think is most powerful about mental isolation is that it is literally a factory for creating stories. And when you're in your own echo chamber, and by being in an echo chamber, you start reinforcing these senses of identities. Because I think we all know as entrepreneurs in our up and down roller coaster rides of excitement, and then, oh my God, I don't have any of this figured out. And then, oh yeah, I'm on fire. And then, you lose 2 clients. You're like, oh my God. So this roller coaster ride and this identity you can create for yourself about whether you think you're winning or not winning, how you think other people are doing in comparison to yourself. It's a big one. Right. And, where you think you should be at this point versus where you are. So all these things in this echo chamber and factory storytelling kind of thing going on, it can really create a perfect storm of mental isolation, where you just feel like you're in a whirlwind. And I can certainly relate to that. I know many of my clients can as well. Often people come to me and I'm sure with yourself as well, Marty, for productivity tips and hacks and all that fun stuff. But unless we first get to that sense of mental isolation and what's holding us back, it's hard to move forward. So it's a really important topic. And I don't think it's talked about enough. So I think this is really good that we're talking about it. It's a bit vulnerable as entrepreneurs to be like, yeah, I'm mentally isolated. To even recognize it, right? To even be self-aware enough around it.
I think that the pandemic has created a little bit more openness around it, because people were aware of, like, I physically am disconnected from everybody and could speak a little more openly. But I loved 2 things you said. One, in my own experience, when I had a marketing agency, I came into a business that had been losing $1 million a quarter. Just before I joined, they had lost $993,000 in 3 months. And so coming into this storm of a business, I really did feel isolated, because I was in the operations, the board, they dropped in every quarter, we're disconnected. I didn't feel like I could talk about, this is how bad the problems are with all of the staff. I had to put on sort of a smiley face. And I felt a great deal of, like I said, the ability that there's so many things I'm managing in my head without any input from anybody. But the second piece of that was, like you said, the story I started to tell about so many things. I'm now having a conversation with myself about what somebody else thinks, or about what they're doing, and I realized, and so I think, like you, use that the expression or the phrase, the story you're telling. And I often use it in sales. If you're sitting talking to yourself about what the prospect is thinking, that's actually a conversation with you. You're in that chamber. You're not actually talking. And it's like, oh, right, I was carrying on both sides of the conversation. And I think it's dangerous in business, but it really becomes dangerous in this sort of isolation, because I think it's bad for your own emotions. But it also creates a false reality. And so often you run into that. Is there, how do you, I guess one of the things that comes from that is that feeling of isolation, and the flip side of that being connection. Are there things that you've done in your career that really helped you make connection, or how you keep some of that and foster it so you don't feel isolated?
Yeah, I think connection is the answer for many of our woes as entrepreneurs and humans in general. And for, I would say for a full decade. So my background is several different types of businesses. And for a full decade of my one company, where it's more coaching and whatnot, I truly lived in a vacuum. Now, you have to remember too, that in concert with all of that, I had very small children. I was trying to, like many entrepreneurs probably listening right now, you have all kinds of life circumstances around you. But I wish that after all the coaches that I had and the mentors, I wish someone would have held my hand, looked at me and said, I see you. I know it's not easy. And one of the best gifts you can give yourself is getting out of your office and making connections. And that can look different for many people. But you can go to networking events. We'll have some tips around that in just a little bit as well. But get out and meet people. It doesn't have to just be people in your own industry. It can be anyone who is living a similar challenge as an entrepreneur, because they will be able to, I think everyone wants to be seen, heard, and to feel valued. And it's hard to do that when you're in your own echo chamber. So getting out and getting connected. And there's so many great organizations in your community. There is nationally as well, and in organizations and resources like with Evolve, there's so many ways that you can create those connections. So, but you have to intentionally seek them out and be open to it, and be open to that. It's not just about creating a connection to produce a result. It's about creating a connection to enhance your entrepreneur experience.
I love that. Yeah, you're not looking to make a networking connection as a strategic alliance partner or a sales opportunity. You're looking for that human connection piece, right? And understanding the shared experience that I think that the shared experience for me is where, and I think maybe this goes to the fear. And so I maybe touch on this, that I think as a business owner, there's always the presumption of like, everybody else must be doing it better. I'm the only one that's struggling with this. And I think one of the beautiful parts about recognizing first identifying and becoming aware of when you're sort of mentally isolated, but then getting out. And I've had this so many times where I finally build up the courage to be a little bit vulnerable about, here's what's going on in my business, whether it's because of economic circumstances or whatever. And so often people have been like, well, me too. Oh, we just went through that last quarter. And in that moment, you're like, wait, you mean I'm not the only one? And I think one of the themes of mental isolation is I'm the only one going through this. And so getting out and meeting people, whether it's networking or having people that you can call on, that dialogue always for me brings back to being like, oh, wait, these are common universal problems and themes for every business owner out there, and not just specific to what I thought up until the moment I talked to somebody it was just me.
Yeah, we tend to naturally have, and it's not a bad thing, a very self-centered perspective, because it's all we really know. And I love that shared experience language you used. And another point too for creating connection is industry associations that you can be a part of. And I've definitely found that to be so valuable. And again, I wish someone would have sat me down, many, many years ago and said, really invest your time in this, because it's going to make a big difference to your experience.
I know a young guy who runs a business out of Montana, and he got involved with an industry group where he's got 6 or 7 people in sort of I don't want to call it a mastermind, but it's a peer group. Yeah. And because they're all in the same industry, they have to be in a different state. But he was, he said to me one day, I was just startled by the fact that all the problems I was having in my business, every one of these other people in their state were having the exact same problems, or had them, or somebody the following year had the problem. And there was just that really shared experience. So I love that, whether it's, an individual, like having a coach or another couple of good friends that are entrepreneurs, or a peer group, or an organization like EO. Like there's lots of ways, or, being a chamber member. There's so many different avenues available to be able to create a bit of network with people who are going to get it if you're courageous enough to sort of speak about your experience.
Yeah. Put yourself out there a little bit and be a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah. When you're dealing with clients, and if maybe they've got a small business, or they just tend to, maybe they're a little more introverted, but they lean towards this idea and don't have the network. Are there other places, like, what about over the pandemic? Did you direct people to use online resources? What are some of the other things people could do to help with that connected feeling that maybe you've recommended for them?
That's a great question. And I think the pandemic definitely boosted up the online options that weren't maybe there as much, but and true for some people, it's very, very intimidating to get out and go to networking events. And I love to work with clients on those skills because I think they're essential for developing business. But online, there are many wonderful organizations and groups, and there's LinkedIn groups, and it's just a matter of finding the right one where there's a good fit, where they're actually active. I had one person once say, but I joined 4 LinkedIn groups for people doing the same thing as me, and I'm just not getting much out of it because they weren't active groups. So you have to kind of be, again, intentional. And in some cases, it's a matter of creating your own. So, I know in my town, we actually created a group of about 10 women in business, and we met quarterly and went through our goals, but, drank some wine, had some fun, but it was a beautiful connection. Sure. Yeah, it was fantastic. And I highly recommend for someone who wants just a small group, and you can pick and choose who you want. And again, you're engineering your own support network, and that's taking agency over that experience, it's not just something that's going to happen in some cases. So you can create it for how you want it to be. But there are a lot of online resources. Facebook groups are still pretty active, I find, as well. And again, a lot of the organizations we mentioned earlier, there's women-based ones, but generally speaking, entrepreneur-based organizations in most cities, they often now have online portals as well as options.
And I think when we talk about social groups, like joining a Facebook group is different than scrolling through Facebook or scrolling through Instagram. That is not eliminating any sort of isolation for you. Right?
Yeah, right. As much as it kills time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's great to be like, well, it broke me away from what I was thinking and in the circular loop in my mind. But it's like, well, that's not actually looking or creating any sort of solution. One of the things I've always found, have you ever had, I think about people don't realize the key people that are already in their network. And I've always talked about my friend Dominic, who's in Vancouver, and other key guys where I can phone them at any time. And they, as entrepreneurs, are people I can lean on. No matter how bad my day is, they can share that and sometimes say, oh, I can beat that day, right? And we can have sort of, but whether it's a really big high or a really big low or a problem I'm having, I have that network. But it became apparent to me as things started to open up this year that there's a lot of people that are great entrepreneurs and business owners and resources for me that I'd gotten out of the habit of reaching out to and connecting with. And so some of it, one of the things for me, and I think for clients or business owners is, who do you already know that you just need to reconnect with? We have a great client named Anna, and Anna had said, well, I just on her LinkedIn started reaching out, actually having phone conversations with some people she hadn't talked to in a decade. And all of a sudden, she's like, I'm having great conversations, and now we're connecting for a coffee. And it's really just sort of helped blossom that live network again.
And isn't it a beautiful thing? I think we appreciate it so much more now that it was taken away from us for a little bit. And now we can kind of get back to it. But I agree. And I've done it myself in my own experience where there's key people in my world that I just don't get to see or talk to very often that I'm reaching out. And a lot of coffees happening right now and lunch dates. And it's good. And it feels good. And, you were talking earlier about that sense of connecting with other people and hearing their stories and being like, oh, it's not just me. And I think a big part of that is that it helps to diminish our fear of not being adequate enough or not knowing enough, which is a real big one in our echo chamber as entrepreneurs, generally speaking. Even though we get to another level, it just kind of expands and grows in different ways. But yeah, just a sense of, I'm hesitant to use the word validation, but that's how it almost feels when someone's like, "Oh yeah, I've been facing this problem," and you're like, "Oh my God, that's exactly what I've been dealing with." It's validated, right? But
yeah,
So it feels good to make the connections, spend the time, invest in it, have those coffees, go for those lunches. It can transform your whole experience.
I also think that some of the isolation, I certainly over the last few years, but I can think of even when I've had, again, that office where I've got a door on the office. And although there might be people right across the hall, you can still be in that sense of feeling isolated or managing and running it on your own. And I often found that, and I think you just touched on it, the ability to get out of that physical space, to change your environment is a great thing to be able to do. For the longest time, have found my most creativity. And with creativity, it is a break from sort of the weight of maybe the challenges of day-to-day running a business. But that creativity at a coffee shop, just sitting with a coffee, having some alone time, but in fact, surrounded by people. But I'm not having to interact with all of them. It's almost like a passive observer. But I've always found that to be a great space for me to change up my routine and help me feel more invigorated and connected and creative.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a third place you like, or is there a place outside of your office that you like to be like, this is another great avenue for me, or, like a physical environment?
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure. I live in the Okanagan, so we have beautiful lakes here and docks. And often in the mornings after I drop off all the children's, 4 drop-offs every morning right now. It's going to change next year. I got the bus system going for me. But I finish the drop-offs, and I find when I'm in my office, probably like many of you, I'm immediately in action. Like, okay, what's coming up? What do I have to do? What problems do I need to solve? And of course, client call, all that fun stuff. So I like to take a little break, and I'll actually go to my favorite dock, which is down at the water, and and it's not a lot of time, but I literally just go walk to the end of the dock, watch the water flow for a little bit. It's so connecting. I just need a breather every now and then to remind myself. And I think this is a really important point, that I am not my business. Like I am, but my whole identity is not my business. And it is too easy to get sucked into the fact that everything about my life is this business. And I have hurt family relationships because I'm just so focused, and it becomes everything I think about and my full identity. So I have been working really hard in the last 10 years to make sure that I'm aware, and I'm intentionally being present in relationships where it's not just about my business. Because honestly, my partner does not understand my business. He cares, but he doesn't get it at all. And if I try talking to him about it, he's like how I look when he's talking to me about hockey. And then for a long time, I'd be hurt, and I'd be like, you're not listening. You don't understand me. And so I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, right? So where do we look for that validation, and where do we look to be heard? But recognizing that I have to take care of myself, and I have to create those connections where I can feel heard, valued, and understood. And then taking the breaks, like going to the dock and just being me for a few minutes and just enjoying it, just truly enjoying it.
You know what I love, Trisha? You brought up 2 great points there. One is that oftentimes people have some people around them, but when they do express, you have to remember that the audience and that sort of community or the connection you're trying to make, maybe it's not with family because they may not get it. And so you have to find other entrepreneurs or business owners or business people, coaches, whatever, who are like, oh yeah, I've been there. I totally, because it really is in that moment of somebody going, I get you. I get the situation, that it's like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. Yeah. But I also like your point about connection. Doesn't always need to be other people. It's even that element of quiet time, right? It could be nature related. Every business owner I can think of who takes time out to go hiking in the mountains or go for physical activity, a run, that oftentimes that time away from the business helps eliminate that isolation, and they come back, physically fired up. And I think it helps move and create action as a tool. So I love that it could be quiet time, but just you're bringing up that connection to nature and something. It's not just about connection to people.
Yeah. And recognizing what really matters in life, what really matters.
Right. When you're dealing with clients and somebody gets into that space of mental isolation, do you ever help pull them back up to be like, just that, like, let's get back to what we're trying to create here. Let's get back to the big picture and help them get more perspective? Is that a tool that you use?
Absolutely. And I feel like that is probably a big chunk of our time together, especially in the beginning, because often individuals will come to me as entrepreneurs saying, well, I need to be more productive, or I need to get my team rowing the boat the same direction. Like there's a lot of different kind of symptoms, but at the end of our conversations, it's quite clear that as an individual, they need to get centered. Right. So, and I don't mean like fluffy centered, like let's all just be calm and breathe and
Sing
focus.
kumbaya.
Yeah. Right. It's about like getting back to your priorities. Why are you in business? Who are you serving? How is this positively impacting them and your own life? Because you don't want to just work and grind for 20 years to try to grow something, then to look at back and be like, I missed out on my kids, or I missed out on truly being present with my team and having more fun. And so I don't believe it has to be one or the other. I think growth doesn't have to be the grind. And so helping clients to get clear on their purpose in business and life, it's a synergy between the two. And then also health. And, I think too often we let our health go to the wayside because we don't have time. We're so busy. We got to take the opportunities when they come. And it's like desperation. We want to go from desperation to determination. And those are two very, very different energies. And to do that, we have to focus on our health, being present with nature. So one of my strategies when working with clients is to have deliverables, like accountable deliverables, where how are you connecting with nature once a week, if not more? How are you taking care of your nutrition? And I'm not a dietitian or by any means or a nutritionist, but like we all know what we need to do to be a little healthier.
If I say to you, I'm having McDonald's every day, you would be able to identify for me, I don't know if this is the best approach, Marty.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And having someone that you can be accountable to for it. And that's why I have coaches, because I need accountability. I need someone to say, did you do it? So, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Right. And I love the book, Atomic Habits. I love the principle of 1%. Is just doing a little bit more. And, for so many years, a classic example is just exercise and like, oh, I got to get up and do that 5K run, or I got to do that hardcore 1 hour workout, where now I get up at 5:30 and I do my 20-minute fit on body workout and I feel great. And it doesn't have to be a grind, So anyways, I want people to look at how they do business and how they can do it lighter, with less effort, for more results. That's the key.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. With more fun.
My first business partner wore the long hours and the mental isolation as a badge of honor. When everybody else went home at 6 o'clock, I was here till 11 o'clock. And in reflecting on that, there was that element of like, did that really make him a better business owner? No, in fact, over time, it creates that mental isolation, that sense of, there's an entire team of people every day showing up to help build the business. And instead of having that gratitude of like, we're doing this together, we're in it, we're all, rowing in the canoe together, it starts to become a little of us versus them, or him versus everybody, where, oh, well, I'm doing all this extra and you people aren't contributing the same way. And I really saw the negativity versus, like you said, hey, do your best, work hard, have that focus list of the things, but also the time away from the business become great for recharging you, for resetting things. I was curious, you touched on something there where you said, first thing in the morning, doing a 20-minute workout, or is that part of your routine that you think helps create, I guess, put you in the right mental space to really be able to tackle business effectively?
That's a great point. And I agree. Yeah, 100%. When I wake up and I'm disciplined enough to do it, because most of the time I don't feel like doing it. 5 minutes into it, I'm like, I'm doing it. But right when that alarm first goes off, who does? Let's just be honest, we're human.
Right. It's always motivation after the action, right? This is one of my favorite things, right? It's like, when do you feel good about the workout? About 18 minutes into the 20-minute workout. It's like, now I'm rolling.
Yeah. I should go for 5 minutes more. Maybe not. Maybe I'll have my coffee. But and I actually just recently did a workshop and I was talking to leaders, and this came up time and time again, where people were working out in the morning, or going for a walk with their dog in the morning, or doing something intentionally that was positive for themselves in the morning. And it could even be journaling or sitting and having a nice coffee on their deck, or whatever the case may be. And they were sharing, and I agree with the whole philosophy. It sets you up for the whole day because you took care of you. And that is a really important mindset, because how can you be of service to others if you're not taking care of yourself? And being in business is being in service of others, your clients, your team, your business, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I do think that having that discipline and accountability and being able and just doing it builds that muscle of motivation and discipline. And it feels good. It just feels good. And then on the other side of it, like lighten up a little bit us entrepreneurs, because maybe on a certain day
Mhm.
you're too tired and you don't want to do it. So you got to like kind of be in tune with your body and your mind, and give yourself grace. And I just find
Yeah.
we're so like go, go, go or not go, we're like either stuck or we're like full on. Well, there's a gray area.
Right.
And I think every day, if we have a little bit more
Oh,
flexibility.
we don't have any clients like that are full on or stealth, right?
What is
There's
it?
yeah, two speeds, 100 to 0.
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's how we're wired, right? Because for most of the time, everything's just a possibility. And then we're like squirrels and it's exciting. And then it's overwhelming and then you fall back. But yeah, so we can be a little bit more flexible and have more grace with ourselves every day. And that invites more joy, fun, and fulfillment. And that's what I like to work with my clients on, is how do we increase those levels?
I love that. Yeah, I mean, because I was like, I use the expression in the restaurant business, hey, look, we're not curing cancer here, folks, to sort of take the pressure off, right? Because there's that, we individually, and I think business owners, the worst, sort of wind it up to be like, we're changing the world one donut at a time, or we're doing whatever your widget is, right? Or this next contract. And it's actually mostly self-driven, all the pressure and anxiety and weight we put on things. And so out of fun, I joke with people, hey, we're not curing cancer here. Like, it's just another pasta. So if we have to remake it, we're not changing the world. It's okay. But I'm trying to bring some brevity or some lightness to, hey, let's have fun with this business. And that's going to reflect well. But what I discovered was, in coaching my team like that actually brought me back to being like, oh yeah, right, I should take my own advice. I should be having more fun with this. And it, in guiding the team that way, it gave me a lot more enjoyment of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Trisha, I wanted to ask you, is there, when you do get clients, because obviously as business owners, there are pressing things. Sometimes there are serious issues around cash flow or around, hiring or finding team. Is there a time of day that you find people are most effective at tackling the real challenges they have? So that, and I get moving to this idea of, how do you take action so that you aren't just feeling isolated in those problems? Is there a way that you often said to people, here's a time of day to tackle the tough stuff, or an approach, or what's your advice there?
Yeah, I think everyone has kind of their own rhythm. This is something I've definitely learned. I'm a morning person. Obviously, I like to get up early. I do the hard stuff first. Yeah. Yeah. But I've learned not everyone's like that. And it fascinates me when some of my clients their good to go time is between 3 and 5. I'm like, really? I'm like done. My brain's shutting off at 3. I'm doing admin stuff at 3. But so I find everyone's a little bit different. So really being aware of your high energy times or focus time, your creative time versus your ability to really problem solve time. I think those are kind of 2 different skill sets as well. So just being aware and taking time inventory. So, for a week, I'll often get my clients for a week to 10 days to write down what they do during the day and how their energy levels for each one, and just kind of seeing their pattern and being open to changing it too. And this really falls in line and is a powerful tool for people who are living life circumstances. They're constantly changing. So children, they can really mess up okay, this is what my week's gonna look like. And then, no, it doesn't. Taking care of elderly parents, and then maybe even having multiple businesses where there's a lot of competing, like taking you away from different things.
Things to focus on. Yeah.
Thank you. That's the word I was trying to think of. So, and just being open to that, that it doesn't have to always be the same. Again, living more in the gray, that every day could be a little bit different, but just generally being aware of where your energy levels are at what time in the day.
It's funny. I used to think that when somebody would talk to me, the first time I had somebody ask me, like, what is your energy like through the week? I was like, look, I'm just going to push 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week. I just push. That's my energy level. But when I became aware of, just like you, man, I'm super creative and I can tackle things first thing in the morning. I was like, oh, that's the way I've got to structure my day to be more efficient, but also to really, I guess, mentally feel like I'm making progress on these things. So much of, our feeling of accomplishment is just being able to say I've moved sort of moved the brick along, like I've just made some progress. But I've also found that, Thursday afternoons during the week is my worst time. So if we were doing this webinar, I'd never be like, let's do it Thursday at 3:00. I'm just aware of the fact that I have a natural energy to my week and to my day. And it's helped me. The more I recognized and respected that, it's actually made me a better business person, I think.
Mm-hmm. It really does. And more productive. You take action in more aligned ways. So a recommendation to anyone listening to do a time inventory audit is just have a journal of your week, and every hour, just put your energy level between 0, like really not very much, 10, pretty high up there. And then over time, you can see a pattern. Do it for a week.
I love that. Yeah, because you can do that. I like that as an energy study. And then I also like the time and movement study where, basically the same thing, but on a 15-minute increment, how are you spending your time? Because sometimes you realize I've seen where they realize how many hours in a day they spend at their desk or how many times they're in a meeting. And just the awareness again of how you're spending your time allows you to start to be able to control it.
Mm-hmm.
Trisha, I was wondering about reward. Is there a place that you use reward or celebration to help with, I don't know, just making sure that you stay, it moves you away from that isolation? Is there a way that you've typically done that with clients, or that you promote the idea of celebrating or rewards?
Mm-hmm. I love celebrating. I love food. I love to celebrate food. But yeah, so helping clients to recognize their successes. And that doesn't just mean getting the next big giant contract or, growing your team by 5. Yeah. The chamber awards, commerce stuff. It's the weekly celebrations. So being clear on what you were looking to accomplish and the measurables that you have in place, and then recognizing when you move towards them or achieved them, and taking the time to actually do that. Because I feel like most entrepreneurs will be self-deprecating, like, oh, I didn't actually get enough done. I didn't do enough. I could have done it better. I should have done more, that kind of stuff. Right. So, but when I work with people, I'm like, look what you did. Like, you did a lot of what you said you were going to do. Like, holy crap, like, look. And it's like there's like a gap between what you think and what is there. So, I mean, some weeks more than others, but so definitely, taking the time just to look. And then in terms of celebrating, everyone likes to celebrate a little bit different. Some people like to take themselves out for dinner, like to go for a walk, or spend a little extra time at home. I think that's different for everybody. And we definitely figure that out pretty quick in our relationships of what matters. But personally, for me, it's all about going out for dinner. It's like, oh, you know what? I did that. I'm going for dinner. Even if it's by myself.
I love that. And I know my wife, Lisa, is a big fan of, like, we should go for dinner. That's a great way to celebrate things. One of the things I loved is your point about, even if somebody got 40 things done in the week, they're always aware of the 50 that they didn't get done.
Yeah.
And I think you and I have done these sort of things with teams where somebody say, well, what do we get done in the last month? Or even I can think of doing an annual review with a team where I said, hey, let's go over the things that we got done this year. And, it starts kind of slow, like, well, we did this, and yeah, I guess we had that. And then as you start to fill up a whiteboard, people start to look and be like, wow, actually, you're right. We've actually got an unbelievable amount of stuff done. And I think that's true with most business owners. They discount that, I only got like 5 things done this week. Yeah, but look, one of them was, refinancing everything in the business with the bank. That was pretty major. Or maybe it was that giant contract. But I love that having somebody to support you. And again, like a coach or another entrepreneur, or it could be anybody, but there's got to be somebody who sometimes helps point out to you, look at all the progress you're making. Because that mental isolation does not tend to lean towards, look at the progress you're making. It tends to lean towards, look at all the things you didn't get done, right? Yeah. It tends to be that negative voice. So I love that you also need some outside perspective to sometimes point out, these are the places you should be rewarding yourself or celebrating. I think that's I don't know, to me, that's one of the things that makes, if you get in the habit, and it changes, as for me as an entrepreneur, the number of things I've learned to celebrate. I used to celebrate just big milestones at the end of the year, and then realize, like, oh, I should be having more fun and doing more small things. And it's a good culture to build.
Mm-hmm. And it could also be celebrating, so one more point around that, energy and time. So, maybe you're now able to get everything done, or you've engineered, you'll notice I use that word a lot, because I think it's so important as entrepreneurs that we're just that agency engineering. Maybe we engineered a Tuesday to Friday work week. So your Mondays, you get to really spend time at home doing your laundry if you want, getting caught up, or maybe spending time with your kids, whatever the case
I
may
hope
be.
that's not it.
Yeah, right. But well, in fact, sometimes it's a little extra time at home to do those kind of things takes a lot of the weight off. I don't know, just it's different for everyone. But yeah, so it could be also celebrating that you're able to engineer your experience as an entrepreneur the way you want it. And the celebration part is just being present and enjoying it. So I'll give you a personal example for myself. Is my daycare recently shut down. There was a licensing issue.
Surprise.
Anyways, yeah, I was like, oh crap. Okay. So, but then ended up being in-laws helped out. But anyway, so I ended up with a day to spend with my 4-year-old. So I have the 4 kids, but I only have one that's not in school. Right. And you know what? I was able to move things around, and the key was to intentionally enjoy that day and sit down and play. Like, I don't have to be checking emails. I don't I created the space. I'm going to enjoy it. And so whatever you're creating space for, think about that. What are you creating space for in your life? You should be creating space for the things that bring that joy, fun, and fulfillment, so you can get out of that isolation, create those connections, but intentionally actually enjoying them. That's really important.
You know what? I almost segue from that to one of the things I see as a challenge for people is sometimes where they don't like an aspect of their business. And the easy default would be like the accounting or the bookkeeping. Yeah. And so they get into this element of like, and I can think of one guy in particular who comes to mind, where it's like, because he wasn't good at the accounting and the bookkeeping, he would of course then have to spend 3 and 4 times as much time as somebody capable could do. But in that, it was almost like just this misery of having to do this. And every month that by taking on that task, he would sort of cycle down, right? Become isolated. Like, I've got hours just socked away doing this kind of work. And one of the first things we did was say, what do you not enjoy doing? He was like, I hate the bookkeeping and accounting, and just outsourced that. Like, just took it off his plate, found somebody else who could do it. And that created a whole lot of freedom for him and a better enjoyment. So I don't know if you've ever found stuff like that, where you find things that the client doesn't like or a business owner doesn't like, to be able to say, let's find a way to get that out of your life for your day to day to make this a richer experience for you too.
Yeah, that can make such a big difference, right? I look at it as what's providing the most resistance versus momentum. And so accounting would be certainly for me on that list, and for a lot of people I know, and many other things. And sometimes it's a certain product maybe that or service you provide that a little bit more resistance. You could bring someone on as contract or on board, or hire a team member to take care of that. But you're right. So again, kind of taking ownership over that experience and making the changes you need to make.
Trisha, how do you do that? Do you, when somebody's struggling, how do you walk them through? Is this a source of resistance, or is this a source of momentum? I mean, how do you enter that conversation? Because I think that's a great sort of reflection to be like, what's blocking you and what's giving you momentum, and how do you help people navigate that?
Yeah, it's a super useful framework. I use it all the time in my own life experience as well. But yeah, by essentially doing, again, that time inventory audit. So what are you spending your time on? How is it providing resistance, or is it creating momentum? Does it drive you, or does it drain you? That's another version of that. And then really looking at the whole business, the products you provide, the services, your team as well, like operational aspects of your business. That's where bookkeeping comes into play. It could be more the HR side. Depends on the size of your team, your business, right? But looking through each piece and then just asking that litmus test. And you intuitively know, right? People know what's providing the resistance or the momentum. In some cases, it's reframing how they approach it, which could be all the change that is needed. In other cases, it's outsourcing, or perhaps even making a change to the team, or change to what you're providing in terms of services and products. But all these questions are super important to ask, because I find as business owners, we start down a path and we get rolling with it. And money's coming in from certain things. And then we get these ideas in our head about how it has to be. But it's important to take a quarterly look at, does it have to be like this? Could it be different? How could we do things different so it's better for yourself as an owner, but also for your team and for everything, right? And how can we engineer the experience to level up?
I love that. Okay, because as you know, I'm a big fan that any variable within the business can change. You don't like your office, you could move offices. Maybe it's not this afternoon, but you could make that shift. You don't like this product line, dump it. maybe not this afternoon, but you can start to put those things in motion, and the business is organic. And
Yes.
yeah, you can change just about every variable. I mean, if nothing else, the pandemic proved that, well, if you don't like working from the office, you can work from home. And up until that point, you're like, well, I never could do that. Oh, wait, as it turns out, we can with just enough push, right?
Mhm.
And the pandemic in a lot of ways created that momentum. I love that. Have you ever found that with people where business owners, where helping them break down some of their goals, like, maybe they've got some goal, world domination, and that by breaking that down into smaller stages also helps alleviate some of that pressure and help them take action more effectively?
I think goals are so important. We all need goals as humans. We like to be able to driving towards something. It provides structure. It provides so in some cases, the motivation, especially for doing things that provide momentum versus resistance. So quarterly goals and yearly goals, 5-year plans. It's nice. It's good to have like an umbrella, but where I spend most of my time with clients is in the quarterly and the year, even 2 years, because you want to know where you're going. But then when those are set, which will evolve and change, that's
Sure.
important to know, right? Then we're looking at our weekly experience. And I think we get stuck in our quarterly and yearly goals, and like that is what we're going for, and we forget to adapt in the moment. So I work with my clients regularly on resiliency and adaptability to be able to not only see the opportunities, but to jump on them in a way that is aligned. But it's the weekly experience. It's the daily. How are you showing up every day? When you walk into your office or get on your computer, how do you feel? And it's not about being, again, it's legitimately where you put in your energy to build a business that's most profitable and enjoyable and creates impact. I would even argue.
I think in the business space, there's so much push around this. What's your 90-day plan? What are your rocks for the quarter? What's the year? And I love that you bring, yes, those strategic things are important and all that planning, but I very rarely hear somebody say, but it's got to come back to what's your weekly experience like? How are you experiencing your business and living your life week to week? And I love that you have that balancing act, right? You recognize the importance of both of those things.
Mm-hmm. Synergy.
Yeah. Is there, anyway, I haven't heard anybody speak like that and bring it down to like the weekly and daily as being just as important. And I think that's absolutely true, because really, when you talk to somebody about how they're experiencing their business, they're not talking about it in the context of, well, this is my annual plan and I'm at 76% of it. They're talking about, this is what's going on today. This is what's going on this week. Yeah. Trisha, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you often, in terms of frameworks or just ideas, I hate the word hack, but just methodologies you use with clients to be able to help them guide things better and feel more connected and engaged with their own business?
We touched on a lot, which is really great. Good job.
Yeah.
One of the notes I wanted to make about connecting. So we talked in the beginning about how important it is to network. And I know it's more comfortable for some than others, but I feel it's essential to growing your business. So getting out there, making the connections, not only to grow in terms of clients or sales and whatnot, but just in terms of connections for partnerships, allies, and of course, not living in a vacuum and being that own story factory. You're getting more information from other people about how their experiences are. But the key with networking, I find that people often forget, is you need to go regularly. So if you find a group that you enjoy, that you feel has a value for you as an entrepreneur and a person, you go regularly so you can actually forge relationships that have meaning. So you can't just go one time and then go all these different ones. I mean, you can if you want to pick up some business cards, that's great, or hand them out, but go regularly so you can really make those relationships. And these people can be great resources, and you can be a resource for them. And like we talked about, it can be so rewarding to have those kind of connections. So yes, so make sure you go consistently to really develop those relationships.
I think I love that. And in fact, that might be a good segue, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share, and if anybody can see my eyeballs moving around, I'm just going to share a bit of a summary of some of the things we talked about, because I think some of these ideas we've mapped, and other ones I think we've ad-libbed. But the first one that came up actually was just that, attending those in-person networking events. And I like your point about there's a cadence to that. You're not going to build relationship the first time out, that, going regularly. And one of the other things with a group, if you find that group where they're just not a fit, I've had some people who have said, well, I joined a BNI group and it just didn't work for me. Switch groups. I've had people switch and go, oh, this is my tribe.
Nice. Yeah.
One of the second ones we had was schedule in-person coffees and beer meetings. I know we've got a client who started to do this, and it's just brought back his business like wildfire. And he couldn't get out for a whole lot. He was trying to do a lot of things over Zoom and wasn't finding it as effective. But to watch him come alive again is really the exciting part. It's not even about the business that he's generating. Are there any online groups that you typically follow personally, or anybody that help you just with that perspective? Because the third point there around online groups.
Yeah, well, in our world, there's a Canadian Association for Professional Speakers, and I find immense value.
CAPS is great.
Yeah, immense value from just being online, connecting with those folks. So yeah, it can make a big difference for sure.
I love this one, and that you'd mentioned this idea of activity in nature, whether it's a dock or a hike, or just getting out with the family and the dog and friends and stuff. I guess that would be eating.
Yeah, for me, it would be eating. We love going to farmers market on Sundays too. That's great. Popcorn.
That's fantastic. I mentioned, I got out of the home office, and I'm one of those people that needs to have sort of my home life, and then I need to go to work. But I've really found that the coffee shop co-working space has been great as an experience for me, and I think for clients as well. And I love this next point about just recognizing that it is absolutely completely normal. And if you've ever had that feeling of like, I'm the only one dealing with this, I'm embarrassed about my problems, I'm sure nobody else has had to deal with this, I must be the worst business person in the world, those types of thoughts, you are absolutely in the right group. Every one of us, you, me, have had those kind of experiences and that kind of feedback.
And again, I really wish that person would have talked to me many years ago. Get out there and get connected.
It brings up the last point, like hire Trisha, hire a coach, but somebody to help with perspective and accountability and the prioritizing of things. But I really do agree that sometimes people are like, well, I'll just find somebody. If you can't find somebody, there's people like you and I to hire, right? That there are resources that you can put in place quickly. And I think occasionally I see people that are procrastinating where they've been in a funk for 6 months and they're not taking action. And so I like your point about, you're a resource for people that are having that sort of situation. In terms of, I think some of the things we touched on in terms of productivity, I loved your point about just starting 20 minutes. And I appreciate your point about 20 minutes, not 200 minutes to start the day. I sometimes follow online a group that's like, you're up at 5 a.m., you're then weight training, and then you're running for 60 minutes. And I was like, oh, that seems like a lot. I think you have a voice of reason there in terms of taking that morning action. Now I start the day, I put this as sort of beginning the day with the least enjoyable tasks, but I appreciate your point. It might be for some people, if you're a night owl, that's when you've got the quiet time to really dive into some of those tasks. Rewarding yourself, we mentioned that. I love the idea of breaking things into smaller tasks. And this comes, I think, back to me personally. I found developing a habit of, I did get these things done, and being able to check the box, or I use a big blue Sharpie pen and I mark those things off to remind myself or just prove that I'm making headway.
I love watching you use a flip chart or a white screen. Yep. You do a good job. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm a huge fan of this, to delegate tasks, because there's certain things I hate to do, and I think you do too. Yeah. And I always put accounting as being the first choice here, because most business owners I know really don't want to have to deal with that side of the business. And then I come back to this idea of hiring somebody. There's lots of organizations to join, or there's individuals that can help you out. But it really does, I think, for me, coming away from this, I want to make sure that people take away some of these tools to try, but they're also aware of, like, one of the key pieces of not being isolated and feeling connected is having somebody around you. And if you don't have anybody that's obvious or apparent, there's, us as coaches and advisors to people that can help with all those things.
And one of the things I love most about working with business owners is often we use language consistently that is not in alignment with what we actually do. And it's so helpful to have someone, especially like, coaches of coaches, because we see the value, but someone to say, I hear you saying for the last 6 months, this is important to you, but what I see you doing is this, in a really compassionate way that helps people to bring those alignments together. So you can actually invest in yourself and make progress in a faster amount of time. And at the end of the day, what do we want? We want to enjoy our business, and we want to make a profit so we can enjoy the rewards of that as well. And then we want to make, most entrepreneurs we work with at least want to make an impact too. So how do we do all three of those in a way that is less hard? Right.
Trisha, if somebody wants to reach out to you and be able to learn more about whether it's mental isolation and how to overcome that, or they want to talk about their performance as an entrepreneur, or they're looking for connection or confidence or business strategy, what's the best way to reach you and get in touch with you?
Email is always great. I would love to hear your stories. I would love to hear your questions. Feel free to send them to me. I'm all about connection as well. So Trisha@evolvebusinessgroup.com.
And of course, you're on our website at Evolve as listed as if somebody wants to come visit our coach pages. Trisha, let me just say thank you to everybody who's listening. I'm going to make sure that we send out information as a follow-up, and that if you need a recording of the event, we'll share that out with other people too. Trisha, any parting thoughts that we can leave the audience with?
Just, be graceful with yourself, lighten up a little bit, and remember to have fun and enjoy the experience, because that's what really matters. And what I have noticed in my own life and those with my clients is that when you come at it with that kind of energy, it's amazing the opportunities that come your way and the growth that happens as a result of that slight change in perspective.
That's fantastic. Thank you. That's a great parting thought. So anyway, thanks Trisha, Marty, for your time today. And thanks for everybody for joining us. I'm Marty Park from Evolve. Have a great day.